Sometimes I play scramble golf when I'm by myself. I sometimes like to golf when the weather is a little bit interesting, like spitting some rain and windy and not many people out there, and I'll just take 4 balls and hit them and play the one I like the best. It's a good concept. We're in a series this August looking at 5 incidents, 4 in the Old Testament and then 1 in the New, of people encountered by God and how they responded. Now, if you've been here the last week or 2, you know the 3-word response that is most common that we'll hear again today. You'll know that, right? And that 3-word response is, "Here I am." We'll hear it again today as we look in Genesis at Jacob. I'm chopping up the Genesis readings a bit. The Jacob saga in Genesis takes many chapters. I'm going to isolate several verses, first in chapter 31 and then a little bit in 46. In chapter 31, verse 3, "Then the Lord said to Jacob, 'Go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you.'" That's pretty clear. But Jacob has a kind of a scheme going on. Jacob usually had a scheme going on. And in verse 10, we pick up as his scheme ends, and then God speaks again. "In breeding season, I once had a dream in which I looked up and saw that the male goats mating with the flock were streaked, speckled, or spotted. The angel of God said to me in a dream, 'Jacob,' and I answered, and he said, 'Look up and see that all the male goats mating with the flock are streaked, speckled, or spotted, for I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and where you made a vow to me. Now leave this land at once and go back to your native land.'" Another clear word. But Jacob often had trouble with clear words from God. Not always, but often. So it took a while. And then we move over to chapter 46. Quite a bit has gone on in the intervening chapters. Verse 1, "So Israel, which is the new name God has given him, set out with all that was his, and when he reached Beersheba, he offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. And God spoke to Israel, Jacob, in a vision at night and said, 'Jacob, Jacob.'" Now, we note that's excellent, and we note then that God is customarily identifying himself with an "I am" statement. I am. 2 weeks ago, when God appeared to Moses in the burning bush, and Moses asked, "Whom shall I say sent me?" God said, "You tell them, I am that I am sent you." And in our New Testament lesson in a few moments, we'll notice another instance in the Gospel of John where Jesus identifies himself with an "I am." "I am God, the God of your father," he said. "Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you into a great nation there. I will go down to Egypt with you, and I will surely bring you back again. And Joseph's own hand will close your eyes." Now, that's our first lesson, all about Jacob. And now I move into John 6 at verse 32. And I invite you to stand as you are able for the reading of the words of Jesus. Jesus said to them, "Very truly I tell you, it is not Moses who has given you the bread from heaven, but it is my Father who gives you the true bread from heaven. The bread of God is the bread that comes down from heaven and gives life to the world." "Sir," they said, "always give us this bread." Jesus declared, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. I am. This is the word of the Lord. Let us pray. May the words of my mouth, the meditation of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Be seated, please. Story is told of two brothers who terrorized a town. Their father had left them a prosperous business. They were probably the wealthiest two men in town. But that wasn't enough. They just wanted anything that wasn't theirs, and they usually found a way to get it. Everyone in town stood in a certain fear of them. Not so much respect, but fear, because these two brothers had so much power and used it ruthlessly. They would lie, they would cheat, they would embezzle, they would do whatever it took to get whatever they wanted, and anything that belonged to someone else that looked to them of value, they really wanted, and they usually found a way to get it. And one day, the older brother died. The younger brother went to the Baptist pastor in town, where the family had some history. He said to the Baptist pastor, I want you to do the funeral for my older brother. And I want you to say in that service that he was a saint. And if you do say in that service that my older brother was a saint, there'll be a check for $100,000 in the offering plate the Sunday following. And he left. The Baptist pastor, of course, would do the funeral. And he struggled with, what do I do? Everyone knew this deceased man was a scoundrel. Everyone in town knew that. Everyone knew both these brothers. But, $100,000 would really help our church. What will I do? It came to the funeral. Sanctuary was packed. Younger brother seated in the first row with his immediate family. The pastor got up there, and at one point he said about the deceased, well, this man was a scoundrel. This man lied, this man cheated, this man stole, this man held this town in terror. This man was despicable. But compared to his younger brother, he was a saint. How can I make Jacob out to be a saint? Jacob was a scoundrel. He cheated, he lied, he schemed, he embezzled. His ambition was vain and limitless. And whenever he saw something that he wanted, he just set out to get it. Whether it was his slightly older brother's birthright or his father-in-law's flocks. This Jacob was a conniver. In fact, that's what his name means, conniver. He was always scheming. There's not much that I like about Jacob, except that he had the good sense to court a woman named Rachel. And my wife's named Rachel. I needed to help you with that one a little bit. But this Jacob is pretty much a disgusting character. A schemer, fraudulent. How can I make him out to be a saint? I can't. Only God can do that. And the amazing thing about this Jacob is that in spite of all his flaws, in spite of his sinful ways, in spite of the way he tried to terrorize people around him, God called him. God spoke to him. God saw something there that probably no one else did. Maybe Rachel did a little bit. But if she was as smart as my wife, maybe she saw through him as my wife sees through me. Jacob, hardly a saint by normal standards, but one whom God called and to whom God appeared repeatedly. So will I include him in the great parade of saints with Abraham and Isaac and Moses and Ruth and Esther. By the grace of God, I will. Because God chose to reveal himself even to this schemer. His faults were many and grievous, but that is not the whole story about Jacob. There is more. Just as there is more to every one of us than what others see. Just as there is more to everyone we see whose faults scream out at us. There's more. There's more to this Jacob. When we look carefully, there are some things about Jacob from which we do well to learn. God appeared to him once in a dream. Jacob listened, and here's what God said. This was in Genesis 28. I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac, and I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. I am with you. I am with you, and I will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I promised. God made an investment in this schemer and scoundrel. Bible trivia. First time the word Israel is used in the Bible, the very first time, is not in reference to the nation or the tribe or the clan. It's in Genesis 32. It's in reference to Jacob, the schemer. After wrestling with God's messenger all through a sleepless night, Jacob prevailed. You may remember a little of that story, that Jacob wouldn't let go. And he finally said to this representative, this messenger, this angel of God, I will not let go until you bless me. Now, there was something commendable about that kind of tenacity, that kind of unrelenting faith. I will not let go. And Jacob prevailed. And the messenger of God responded, your name will no longer be Jacob, schemer, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome. It is interesting, isn't it, that sometimes our greatest virtues can be our greatest faults, and sometimes our greatest faults, in God's grace, can become our greatest virtues. And this Jacob, this schemer, this conniver, did have a way of holding on, and he wouldn't let go of God's messenger. And God kept appearing to Jacob, and Jacob kept listening even as he struggled. Even before the name change, God appeared to him. And Jacob is the first one in the biblical parade. He precedes Moses in this. He's the first one who responds to God with those three words, here I am. They first came from the lips of Jacob, which is just good news for all of us, because it's easy to see all that was wrong with him. But when God appeared, he got this right. Here I am. And that simple phrase, here I am, is not a way of locating where we are geographically to God. God knows well where we are. It is a statement of availability. It is a way of saying, I've caught a glimpse of your glory, O God. I've caught a glimpse of your awe and your wonder. Here I am. What do you want to do with me? Where do you want this to go? I'm available. Last Sunday, we added to the Here I Am prayer that wonderful prayer that Eli told Samuel to pray. Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. And as Chris noted, I challenged those of you here last Sunday to carve out some quiet time in the last 6 days, at least once, just to pray this prayer. Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. Now, my assignment is keep doing it. Don't stop. Let's keep doing that. I found in the past week that when I'm driving, my radio was off more than it was on, so that I could just keep saying those words. I found times during the week just to be quiet, which is not my first nature, and say, "Speak, Lord. I'm listening." Now, I didn't write down anything profound, at least that I know of yet. But see, that's not the point. The point is learning to listen. Samuel did, and even Jacob is learning something about responding to God. The biblical pattern is usually this: when God appears and we respond, then God gives us a task, something to do. But the task does not precede the vision of God, it follows it. We saw that with Moses. We saw it with Samuel. Now we're seeing it with Jacob. And he gives him a task. 2 weeks ago, I shared with you a little saying from a church wall in Sussex, England, and a number of you have noted that. And Derek, could you bring that up for a moment? Say it with me. A vision without a task is but a dream. A task without a vision is drudgery. A vision with a task is the hope of the world. The task comes, and it's not a small one. For Moses, go tell Pharaoh that I'm going to deliver the people. Yeah, that's it. For Samuel, you're going to have to deal with Eli's wicked sons, but you're going to do it. And you're going to be the transitional person in this chapter of Israel's life. And now for Jacob you're going to go down to Egypt under my command. You're going to go down there and you're going to come back because I am with you. There's a task. And like all others given a task by God, Jacob feels wholly inadequate. If we're ever given something to do by God, and we are, it is normal that we feel wholly inadequate. In fact, if we don't, I tend to think something's wrong with us. When the Almighty taps us on the shoulder and says, "I want you to do this for me," we should feel wholly inadequate. And then we listen, and God always has more to say. And we begin to see this pattern. God appears, prevenient grace. Some of you wanted me to get that phrase in again. God appears, which is prevenient grace, God coming before we figured it out. There you go, thanks, Zach. God preceding our decision. We respond. We may use these words, "here I am," or words of our own choosing, or no words, but we respond. And then we feel this sense of being wholly inadequate. How will I ever do this? And then what does God say? It usually is something like this: "I will be with you." Moses, when you go to Pharaoh, the most powerful man on the planet right now, and you tell him he's going to lose his slave labor overnight, which had Moses shaking in his boots, God said, "I will be with you. I will be with you." Samuel, when you step into the gap after Eli is gone and his wicked sons cannot pick up the work, Samuel, you're going to be the transitional person for the nation of Israel. I'm going to be with you. Jacob, when I said you're going to leave and go to Egypt, I will go with you. I will be with you. Mendon Church, in your significant transition, hear this word: the God of the universe is walking with you. You're not doing this alone. The God of the universe is walking with you. There's nothing to fear. A challenging task? Yes, of course, but I will go with you. Of all the names given to Jesus, and they are many, and they are all wonderful, none for me surpasses the one that Isaiah saw for him in chapter 7, verse 14. The one that Matthew gives us when Joseph and Mary have been given the word about what's going to happen to their lives. He will be called Emmanuel, which means God with us. God with us. It has not been a great week in the world since we met last. Trouble continues in the Middle East. Trouble seems to be getting worse in Iraq. Robin Williams died. A man who had a gift for comedy that I simply call genius. And he died by suicide because of depression. And the whole nation has had to think about the nature of that debilitating disease. I have an older brother who died the same way from depression. So in a strange way, I give thanks that this is not being kept secret. That Robin Williams, whose work I so admired, now is teaching us something about the reality of disease. It's been a tough week in the world in many ways, and our national news, beyond Robin Williams, has been dominated by a little suburb of St. Louis that most of us didn't even know existed till 8 days ago, Ferguson, Missouri, where 8 days ago, an 18-year-old man was killed in the street. And pretty quickly, that became a national story because of unrest and trouble. And it continues. One moment in the week, I think it was Thursday, really grabbed me. To tell some of the story, because of the rioting in the streets, the protesting, the local police assigned to it, some would say, maybe overreacted. Sending in stormtroopers, police in gas masks, and snipers on top of armored vehicles that are meant to resist the worst kind of terrorism. And it was just getting worse. And on Thursday, the governor of Missouri removed the local police from the jurisdiction and assigned the Missouri Highway Patrol to take over the safety of Ferguson. And he appointed Captain Ronald Johnson to head that effort. Within a short time, Ronald Johnson changed the approach. He is a black man, 51 years old. Wife, 2 children, a career law enforcement person. And he went among the protesters, unarmed, and stood with them. He listened to them. He hugged them. He did everything he could to assure them that he was there with them. Now, the trouble is not over in Ferguson by any means. But it seems to me that Ronald Johnson caught something of incarnational ministry in what he did. And yesterday, when the governor imposed an overnight curfew, Ronald Johnson was quoted as saying, "We will not enforce it with guns and arms. We will enforce it with communication." Now, last night, according to the reports I heard this morning, did not go terribly well. But I believe Ronald Johnson has caught something of the Jesus approach to ministry. In fact, the God approach to ministry. And that is to go be with the people, not aloof and apart from them. To stand with them, to hear them. Now, that Jesus leaves the riches of heaven to come be with us, to listen to us, to walk with us, is the miracle of which Natalie sang. That love came down, and love came right here in our midst to listen to us, to walk with us. Because of God's promise, spoken over and over throughout the Scriptures and fulfilled to the max in Jesus, we know that God is with us, not only in our highest moments, but in our lowest moments. God is with us. We know that God is with us when we feel strong, and we know that God is with us when we feel weak. We know that God is with us when we're full of faith, and that God is with us when we are full of doubt. We know that God is with us when everything seems to be going our way. And we know that God is with us when nothing seems to be going our way. We know that God is with us in Jesus Christ in a way that saves us from fear and worry and anxiety. Because the God of the universe is with us in Jesus, we do not walk alone. Love has come down, and that love walks with us. Hear me when I say to you, in your transition, there is nothing to be afraid of. The Lord is with us. The Lord is walking with you. Hear me when I say that no matter what life throws at us, as individuals, as household units, or as congregations, we have nothing to fear because Jesus is Emmanuel, God with us. The one who is the bread of life will feed us, nourish us, and guide us through every challenge. Now, yesterday, I accepted a challenge, and this is going to seem light and trivial, but I accepted a challenge. Perhaps you've seen some of this challenge happening across our nation. That someone challenged me to take a bucket of ice water. I got the challenge, and I accepted it yesterday, administered by the hands of my grandsons on what was an uncommonly cold August day. I accepted the challenge. And later in the day, someone, and if you want to watch this silliness, I think it's on Facebook or on my whatever, Facebook, YouTube, somewhere out there, things I don't understand. But someone posted an article by a man with ALS, commonly known as Lou Gehrig's disease, and his wife. And they were dealing with the question, does this ice bucket challenge make light of this debilitating disease? And they said no. No, they said they are grateful for anything that calls attention to this disease because they're living with it. Because they're living with it. They know what it is for this man to have lost the ability to move a fork from his plate to his mouth without extraordinary effort. They're living with that. And that thousands of people are seemingly doing this foolish thing of getting doused with ice water to call attention to this disease, they said, is making them really happy and pleased. And I'm going to be making a donation to ALS that I wouldn't have made if someone hadn't challenged me. I'm making a donation. My wife had a school teacher friend, colleague, who fought that disease and finally succumbed to it. And my wife said, before you take the challenge, when you look at the camera, would you just do this in memory of Roseanne Bailey? I was proud to do so. Now, all of this is to say there is something powerful in life about knowing that we are not alone, that someone is with us. That someone is with the troubled people of Ferguson, Missouri, both white and black. That someone is with them. That someone is with people suffering from ALS. That someone is with them. That someone cares and is willing to identify with them. But far beyond either of those, that the God of the universe has come to us in Jesus and said, God with us. We are not alone. God is with us. One of the quotes attributed to Robin Williams, I don't know if it originated with him, but it's one that I read, was, be kind to people because you don't know what they're battling. Be kind to people. And I watched a clip last night. I just had this little prompting, I guess, of maybe my favorite scene from any Robin Williams movie. It was in a movie called Patch Adams, in which he played a crazy doctor, I identified. There was a scene in which he went into a children's cancer ward. And in fact, it was not a Hollywood set. In fact, it was in a real hospital with real children living with cancer. And they just let Robin Williams go in there playing Patch Adams, but in fact he was playing Robin Williams. And using his gift of comedy, within a few minutes, he had those children laughing, jumping on their beds. He relieved them for a few moments of the burden of their cancer by going in there and being with them and being himself with them. If you want to find that, just go to Facebook and type in Robin Williams as Patch Adams visits a children's ward and have tissue ready. Jesus Christ has come to be with us no matter where we are, no matter what our circumstances, no matter what our burdens, no matter what our weights, no matter what our challenges. The Lord of the universe has come to be with us, so we never walk alone. We never suffer alone. We never rejoice alone. Love has come down in Jesus, and he walks with us in everything. In the next few days, who knows what we'll encounter? Who knows what needs we'll encounter? Who knows what circumstances will visit us that we didn't see coming? Or will visit someone dear to us? Let us go into the new week with this absolute assurance. God has promised, I will be with you. Jesus is Emmanuel, God with us, here, now, in everything. God with us, God guiding us. Amen.